Good morning. I know some people had a difficult journey in, and I like to remind people I'm the Treasury spokesperson, not the spokesperson for Thameslink or indeed any other train service in the country right now. Thank you very much, David, and thank you to UK Finance for hosting us today as we, as a party, continue to set out our vision to get Britain growing again and to end the cost of living crisis. Now, we Liberal Democrats believe that we should talk up our country. We are one of the world's leading economies. Our financial and professional services make us a trade superpower. And we are uniquely placed in having the combined advantage of language, law and location. We have strong institutions, we have dynamic markets and universal public services. We have world-leading universities, creative industries and life sciences. We are the third largest market for artificial intelligence, and we have awesome entrepreneurial people. Our United Kingdom is an amazing country and has enormous potential. But we can never take this for granted, and we must accept that we are stuck in a rut, stuck in a doom loop of low economic growth, and that is a big problem. Economic growth matters. We need to get Britain growing again to end the cost of living crisis. We need to get Britain growing again to rebuild our public services. And we need to get Britain growing again to invest in the climate transition and create the well-paid jobs of the future. If we don't get Britain growing again, then we're trapped paying more and more, but with less and less. It's why everyone is working harder and harder, paying more and more in tax and getting less and less in return. So getting Britain growing again must be any government's number one goal. Now, the Labour government says that its number one mission is growth, but too many of its policies are anti-growth. Even next month's Prime Minister, Wes Streeting, thinks that there is no growth strategy at all. Now, Labour has made lots of mistakes, but for me, one of their worst is that they knew for months that they would win the general election, but they just weren't ready. No plan, no vision, no change. Instead, their government, like governments before them, reverted to Treasury brain. The winter fuel payment fiasco, a short-term Treasury tax grab driven by the desire for immediate bankable cuts. The jobs tax, a short-term Treasury tax grab with no regard for the crushing impact on jobs, on growth or investment. The family farm tax and the attack on family businesses, short-term Treasury tax grabs by the Chancellor that could lead to some of the most resilient, long-standing British businesses being broken up and sold off. The list goes on. But this isn't a new problem. For too long, political parties without a vision for growth have allowed the Treasury tail to wag the political dog. And it must stop. For decades, everyone has identified this as a problem. The Treasury does too much. Fiscal policy, economic policy and controlling government spending. In most other countries, these roles are split up. The Treasury enables governments to go for short-term tax grabs that suit political cycles over the need for long-term growth. And the Treasury is disconnected from the real economy. Despite holding all the economic power, the Treasury isn't responsible for policies on business or trade. This leaves British businesses jumping through hoops, speaking to 3, 4, 5 different government departments before they can get an answer. In short, the Treasury is over-centralised, it drives short-term thinking, and it simply isn't designed to deliver the long-term economic growth that we need. Some think it can be tweaked here and there. Some want to centralise it even further by putting some of its powers in the hands of the Prime Minister. But we have a more radical plan. Today, I can announce that we Liberal Democrats don't just want to get rid of this anti-growth Chancellor, we want to get rid of this anti-growth Treasury. And as part of our plan for government, we would break up the Treasury and replace it with a new, powerful Department for Growth. A new Department for Growth with a mandate to boost long-term prosperity, improve living standards and end the cost of living crisis. The Department for Business and Trade would be merged into this new growth department, recognising the central role of British business in driving growth. And a smaller department for public expenditure would be set up to oversee departmental spending and ensure value for money. This new Department for Growth would focus minds on what growth could help us achieve. Stronger economic growth would finally be recognised as the only sustainable long-term solution to end the UK's cost of living crisis. Investment in our NHS, in renewable energy and defence would not be seen just as a cost, but as a way to build a healthy workforce, develop strategic competitive advantage and to get Britain growing again. And it would finally force all other political parties to explain why they refuse to pull the biggest growth lever we have, a better trading relationship with Europe that could rip up red tape and raise around £25 billion a year to fix public services and end the cost of living crisis. And the Department for Growth could help reset the relationship between government and business too. It would end the tyranny of short-term tax grabs trumping long-term growth. It would be a single point of contact for businesses and investors, a single Team UK where business and investment is aligned with national priorities. It would align tax policy to economic growth so something like the jobs tax could never happen again. In splitting up these functions into different departments, we would be following the lead of other major economies like Ireland, America and Australia. But we wouldn't stop there, because for centuries, the UK government has been too London-centric. Whitehall is shorthand for calling the shots. We Liberal Democrats are the only political party with MPs that span from the Highlands and Islands of Scotland down to the tip of the southwest. So we know, we see the differences in economic growth between the southeast and everywhere else. And so we think it's time for change. Under our plans, the new growth department wouldn't just have a focus on spreading growth beyond London. The new growth department itself would be based outside of London, in the heart of the UK's second city, Birmingham. And this would send a strong signal, because a significant indicator of the imbalance in our economy is the yawning gap between the UK's capital city and every other city and every other part of the UK. As a clear example, if we could close Birmingham's productivity gap with London from 37% to 20%, this alone could add around £12 billion a year to the size of our economy. That's a bigger boost to GDP than the India, Australia and New Zealand trade deals combined. And all things being equal, it could lead to roughly £4 billion a year in additional tax revenue. That's enough to build 2 brand new hospitals every year, or recruit an extra 80,000 teachers, or even boost the government's entire farming budget by more than 50%. It's clear as day that the challenges are piling up. Failing living standards, broken public services, rising inequality, and the constant cost of living pressures, grinding people down, pushing businesses to the brink. The two old parties have failed the British public, and the British public are now left asking whether anyone knows how to fix it. Well, we do. And the answer is to get Britain growing again. Creating a new department for growth in Birmingham would be just the first step. Now, we Liberal Democrats know that there is a big job to do. We know there is a huge gap between where we are as a country and where we should and could be. Like everybody else, we feel proud and patriotic, but we are fed up and angry. We are the 6th largest economy in the world, but for most people, life is too hard and too expensive. The next generation of young people could always expect that they would have a better life than the generation before. But that promise for today's young people has been ripped away. And with so many economic shocks, from the financial crisis to Brexit to COVID, the mini-budget, Russia's full invasion of Ukraine and Trump's tariff wars, almost everyone under the age of 40 has spent their entire adult lives with the UK economy in a state of perma-crisis. Now, some, like Nigel Farage and his party, seek to exploit it. They only want to break institutions, not fix them. Others want to hoard power in Westminster for themselves, not spread it around the country for communities. And the Conservatives are shamelessly chasing reform, saying plainly that moderates are no longer wanted in their party. Well, as our party leader, Ed Davey, has said, moderates are welcome in ours. And our message to them is clear. Our future liberal economic vision is rooted in the values that have guided us for almost 200 years. We defeated the protectionist Corn Laws. We opposed the trade barriers of Brexit. We're standing up to Trump's tariff wars. We are the party that champions international trade, fair markets, innovation and dynamic enterprise. And we are the party that established the welfare state. We rolled out the old age pension and free school meals, and we conceived of the National Health Service. We are the party which in government lifted millions of people out of paying tax altogether. And we are the party that established the Green Investment Bank and the British Business Bank to back new climate technologies and British startups. We see wealth creation and social justice not as an either-or, but as two sides of the same coin. We want to get Britain growing again to end the cost of living crisis. And above all else, we believe in our bones that we can once again give people a sense of hope. Hope that we will get Britain growing again. Hope that we will end the cost of living crisis. And hope that the UK's future will be built by all of us, for all of us, together. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to take a few questions from the press, and I think we have Nick to go first. Morning.
Daisy Cooper, setting up a new department in another city would take time, it would cost money, and some of your party opponents might say it would distract your attention from things that might provide growth a lot quicker. So how would you justify the time and money that would be spent on this?
It is entirely consistent with existing plans to move civil servants out of London. 23,000 civil servants were moved out of London between 2020 and 2024, and there is an existing ambition to move 50% of senior civil servants out of London by 2030. So what we're proposing is entirely consistent with plans at the moment. We would simply prioritise this particular department. You do. Go for it.
Why Birmingham? There'll be a lot of people watching this wondering why you're going for something 100 miles up the road rather than the other side of the country. Why not in Scotland, Wales or in the north of England?
Yeah. So there are lots of different bits of government that have been moved all around the country. You know, you'll know the Department for International Development has a base near Glasgow in East Kilbride. There's the Darlington Hub, which is being set up as a campus for civil servants from the Treasury, Department of Business and Trade and other departments as well. We know that DCMS has got a base in Manchester. So there are lots of bits of other government departments that are already being moved round about. But Birmingham is our second city in population terms. It also has a fantastic combination of financial services, manufacturing companies and all the rest. And we do know that there's a very significant indicator of the problems with having over-centralised growth is where the second city is lagging behind the number one city. And if we could close that productivity gap, that would then help to raise all cities and all regions around the UK. So it's for that reason that we've chosen Birmingham. I have Mari.
Hi, I'm here.
Yeah, hiya, Mari.
Hello. Can I also ask you two questions?
Sure.
First, do you have an estimate as to how many civil servants you think you'd be able to cut doing this? And secondly, if I may, can I ask you a question that is not about this, but rather about what is going on in Westminster? And we might have some Mandelson files that will be released soon. We don't know exactly when. Can you just give me some thoughts on whether you think this is going to be dangerous for Starmer and which position he might be finding himself in?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Murray. So first of all, we don't anticipate this would result in any cuts. I mean, we know at the moment that the government is already going through a process where it's asking people to leave the Treasury. It's going through some redundancies at DBT, but we don't think that this move would actually result in any particular cuts. So that's the first thing to say. And of course, to recognise that this is not an attack on civil servants. Like, we know civil servants are professionals. They work incredibly hard. They're committed to public service. This is about restructuring the institutions of government so that we can focus on growth and make sure that business is at the heart of that as well. As for your second question on the Mandelson files, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what else we're going to see, but I think we've all been really shaken to the core from some of the revelations in recent weeks and months. There's no doubt that the Prime Minister's own judgment is really in question. We said very plainly this week that the Labour Party needs to decide whether it wants to keep Keir Starmer or not, because the country cannot afford to have months and years of uncertainty. We need a Prime Minister and a government that is focused on fixing the country, that is focused on getting Britain growing again, that is focused on ending the cost of living, fixing our NHS and social care. We can't afford to have yet another government that is, more worried about its own survival rather than people's livelihoods. Thank you. I've got Elliot.
Hi. Obviously, we're holding this event at UK Finance. In the past, in advance of the November budget, you came out in support of a windfall tax on banks. I think UK Finance are obviously quite opposed to that, considering they're representing the banks.
Sure.
How do you square that and, have conversations with them in recent weeks change your view on that?
Sure. So look, the public finances are in a real mess. We all know that. And of course, I've spoken to the banks and all sorts of other different organisations about this. It's not universally popular, fine. But we've made it very clear that we've got to make some decisions. We did talk about having this windfall tax, largely because banks, for the four big banks in particular, have had unexpected windfalls related to the QE system. This is not a tax on the profits they're making from lending or anything like that. It is from the unexpected profits they've had from QE. So it's a very different part of their profits. But we have also spoken to the banks about some of the plans we had to use that money. Part of that money we wanted to channel into an energy security bank. I'm actually very pleased to see the government is copying our plans in that regard, because we called for an energy security bank, which would then work hand in glove with commercial high street lenders in order to make sure that families, households, businesses and community groups could borrow money to take the energy saving measures they need to make their own households and businesses energy secure. And we also talked about using some of that money to kickstart growth in our local communities up and down the land by giving a VAT cut to hospitality. Of course, it would only have to be time limited. That's the nature of a windfall tax. So it's not something that would be able to, would be an option in a few years' time. But that's, we've spoken to the banks and they might say to us, well, we don't necessarily like your windfall tax, but we do like what you're trying to do with it. So we continue to have those conversations. Another question?
Yeah, and I was also going to ask, obviously, you know, you're basing a major government department around growth.
Yeah.
How do you avoid a kind of growth at all costs mentality? Obviously, you know, I think that is a very important part of the economy, but it's surely not the only part of the entire UK economy.
Yeah. We've accused this government of pursuing growth at all costs. Sadly, they haven't got any growth at all, so we've got the worst of both worlds. Part of the advantage of having the Department for Business and Trade as part of the Department for Growth is that everything would be pulling in the same direction. We've been very clear. We want sustainable growth. We want, we want to make sure that growth follows and delivers on our climate commitments. We are a party that believes in our bones that we should be ramping up climate finance to get that climate transition, not just because it's the right thing for the planet, but because it's one of the fastest growing parts of our economy. 3 times the net zero economy is growing 3 times faster than the rest of the economy. That is where the high growth, high well-paid climate jobs of the future are going to be. And so we would make sure that there wouldn't be growth at all costs. We'd make sure it was sustainable, long-term growth that is good for people and planet and profit. Thank you. And I think, is it Ben next? Yeah, Ben. Where's Ben gone? He was over there earlier. Ben, there you go, yeah.
Hi Daisy, Ben Ruffles from UK Finance. Really interesting to hear about your plans to reshape Whitehall and move part of the Treasury to Birmingham. As David Postings mentioned, the majority of employees of our sector are based outside of London. So I wondered what your thoughts were about the role that the financial services sector can play to drive the growth, the growth that we all want.
Absolutely. Look, I think when people talk about financial professional services, there's often a misconception, right? They're everywhere, in every community, every town, every high street. And they're the people that help people to borrow money to buy a house, to buy a car, to plan for the future. Absolutely vital in terms of starting and growing a business. So we need to make sure that financial professional services remains a highly competitive sector of our economy. I recognise that part of that competition is around compliance. I know there's a big drive at the moment to get all political parties to sign up to reducing some of the compliance costs. There's a huge amount of duplication. I think we know that the cost of doing business in the UK makes the UK quite uncompetitive in some ways, and whether that's energy costs or employment costs, and that points to the jobs tax issue, that competition has been really hampered. And what we hear from business and from financial professional services is that under this government, everything happened at once. You know, whether it was the Employment Rights Act and the new responsibilities under that act, whether it was the jobs tax, whether it was the business rates changes, new legislation, all of it happening at the same time has not helped growth and hasn't helped competition. So we're very keen to see the financial professional services grow and grow in competition and make sure it continues to thrive. Thank you. And a question from Kirsten.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Is from UK Finance. So the UK is an open and outward-looking financial services centre, and as such, the international agenda, which you referenced in your speech, and our relationship with key partners across the globe are absolutely key. So in that context, what's your vision for strengthening UK-EU collaboration in financial services in a way that strengthens that global competitiveness? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Kirsten. If I just start with our kind of core principles, as Liberal Democrats, we are internationalists, first and foremost, and we believe in dynamic, open, fair markets. The challenge, of course, is that we're moving away from a rules-based system to big power politics, and that poses a challenge for those of us who are internationalists. So we recognise that at the same time as trying to retain fair markets internationally, we've also got to build our sovereign capabilities as well. And that's why we want to use some of the financing that can come from financial professional services to build our sovereign capacities in our national security, our food security, our energy security, our cyber security and our biosecurity. It's really important that we harness that. And part of what we can achieve with this Department for Growth is making sure that those national priorities about building our sovereign capability, that we can build some of that investment to align alongside it. To your question about Europe, it's right on our doorstep. and you just can't fight geography. And so, of course, we want to have a better trading relationship with Europe. We think it was a mistake that the Labour Party and the Keir Starmer in particular has excluded financial and professional services from the reset. We think that it should be included. We think that's really important. I think that's the position of UK Finance as well. What I would also say on that is I think overall the city and financial professional services has weathered Brexit better than they thought they might, but there's also a huge amount of anxiety that other countries are racing ahead and we're kind of standing still. And the reality is that even though it may not have been quite as bad as some people thought, our exports of financial services have still dropped significantly by about 6% since the TCA in 2020. So there's no doubt that Brexit has been bad for financial professional services and bad for the city overall. I am also acutely aware there are some parts of the financial services where, because they have slightly drifted away from European rules, they would be slightly anxious about including it in the reset. All I'll say to those parts of financial services is come and talk to us. We'll listen. But I think overall, for the benefit of our country, to get Britain growing again so we can end the cost of living crisis, we have got to get a better deal with Europe. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you all for coming. I think there's tea and coffee. I'll be hanging around for a little bit for anyone who didn't get a chance to ask a question. But thank you for your time. Thank you.